80% casualty rates among StuG crews during World War II raises an immediate question. What made serving in these vehicles so deadly? Even more puzzling, how did a combat vehicle originally conceived for infantry support missions transform into history's most successful tank destroyer, racking up more confirmed kills than the legendary Panthers and Tigers combined? Perhaps most intriguingly, despite Germany manufacturing over 10,000 of these tracked fighting vehicles, making them the Wehrmacht's most numerous armored platform, barely 1,300 remained operational when the Reich finally collapsed. The story of the Sturmgeschütz and the men who crewed them provides sobering answers. The genesis of the StuG traces back to Germany's interwar military renaissance. Wehrmacht planners envisioned a radical new approach to combined arms warfare, requiring mobile artillery pieces capable of maintaining pace with advancing infantry formations. Conventional towed field guns simply couldn't keep up with the tempo of operations German strategists were developing. This conceptual gap birthed the assault gun doctrine. Design specifications called for a relatively compact vehicle, barely exceeding the height of an infantryman on foot, armed with a short-barreled 75mm gun housed within a fixed casemate rather than a conventional rotating turret. Engineers selected the combat-proven Panzer III chassis as their foundation, adding an armored superstructure to accommodate the main weapon. During this developmental period, the Wehrmacht assigned the StuG to artillery branch control instead of the panzer divisions. The logic seemed sound given these weren't traditional tanks. Yet battlefield realities would eventually force a dramatic transformation in doctrine as unexpected threats materialized and combat conditions evolved beyond original planning assumptions. One crucial factor deserves emphasis. StuG operators came from artillery backgrounds. These were trained gunners, not panzer crews. This distinction would prove critically important. Approximately 30 early production StuGs reached frontline units in time for the Battle of France during 1940. Combat employment validated the design concept immediately. Crews successfully engaged enemy pillboxes, fortified bunkers, and hardened positions precisely as doctrine prescribed. The low-profile design earned particular appreciation from crews. Standing barely 2 meters tall, the StuG presented minimal silhouette, making it exceptionally difficult to detect, simple to conceal, and challenging to engage effectively. These characteristics made it naturally suited for ambush operations, a capability that would assume critical importance later. Early combat also revealed limitations. When StuGs occasionally encountered enemy armor, their short-barreled, low-velocity howitzers proved essentially ineffective against armored targets. At the time, this didn't register as a significant problem since anti-tank operations fell outside the vehicle's intended mission parameters. Subsequent production variants introduced incremental improvements: thicker armor protection, enhanced optical equipment, and critically, a roof-mounted machine gun providing desperately needed defense against close-quarter infantry assault, a threat that had already exacted casualties in early engagements. Yet the most significant modifications still lay ahead. Operation Barbarossa, Germany's colossal invasion of the Soviet Union, launched in summer 1941, initially saw StuGs return to their original infantry support mission, delivering close-range, high-explosive firepower. Performance in this role remained exemplary. Then crews began encountering unprecedented challenges on a scale that shocked the Wehrmacht. Soviet armor, particularly the T-34 medium tank and KV-1 heavy tank, represented nasty surprises for German forces. Both designs featured heavy armor protection and mounted powerful main guns. Existing German anti-tank weapons struggled desperately against these opponents, which appeared in quantities far exceeding intelligence estimates. While poor Soviet tactical coordination and command dysfunction initially mitigated their combat effectiveness, the strategic threat couldn't be dismissed. Germany needed solutions immediately. A comprehensive StuG redesign provided part of that solution. The original short-barreled howitzer gave way to a long-barreled 75mm anti-tank gun, basically a modified Pak-40, adapted for the assault gun's casemate mounting. These upgraded vehicles reached the front lines just as Soviet counteroffensives intensified and T-34 encounters became routine. This modification fundamentally altered the StuG's battlefield role permanently. What began as an infantry support platform had evolved into Germany's premier frontline tank destroyer. The StuG proved ideally configured for defensive operations, particularly across the Eastern Front's vast open terrain. That characteristically low silhouette enabled crews to establish concealed ambush positions in terrain, depressions, or amid ruined villages, from which they could devastate advancing Soviet armor caught in the open. Employed in this manner, StuGs became terrifyingly lethal. During the massive armored clashes throughout 1943 and 1944, encompassing the titanic Battle of Kursk and subsequent Soviet offensives, the StuG III established itself as among the Wehrmacht's most valuable frontline assets. German after-action documentation reveals extraordinary effectiveness. Kursk operations saw StuG battalions claim destruction of 423 enemy tanks against losses of merely 8 vehicles. Such kill-to-loss ratios were decidedly atypical for German formations at this stage of the conflict. Yet for StuG units, these numbers became almost routine. Multiple factors explain this exceptional performance. Ambush tactics certainly contributed significantly. Superior optical equipment played its role. But equally important were the crews themselves. Remember, StuG operators originated from artillery units. They weren't conventional tankers. They were precision gunners. Their marksmanship discipline, technical proficiency, and gunnery expertise translated directly into battlefield results. This explains how they consistently destroyed massive numbers of Soviet tanks even under horrific combat conditions facing human wave assaults. The statistical record proves staggering. StuGs ultimately destroyed an estimated 30,000 Soviet tanks throughout the war. No other German armored vehicle achieved comparable numbers. No single Allied tank type matched this total. By any measure, the StuG became history's most successful tank killer. Several of Germany's top-scoring tank aces accumulated significant portions of their tallies in StuGs. Kurt Knispel, the highest-scoring German tank ace with over 160 confirmed kills, achieved many operating a StuG. These vehicles mounted the identical long-barreled 75mm gun, as later Panzer IV models, yet frequently outperformed them. Superior optics, better tactical positioning, and more skilled crews made the difference. Properly employed in ambush, a StuG commanded by an experienced crew became absolutely devastating. The 75mm high-velocity cannon could penetrate 90 millimeters of armor at 500 meters, sufficient to defeat most Allied tanks, including Shermans, Churchills, and later T-34 variants. By 1943, the StuG had matured into a genuinely formidable weapons system. Combat weight reached approximately 24 tons, while maintaining respectable mobility for its class. Frontal armor thickness increased to 80 millimeters, supplemented by additional plates bolted to the hull sides. However, a critical vulnerability persisted: side armor. Ubiquitous Soviet anti-tank rifles could penetrate the thinner side plates on German vehicles. This threat drove widespread adoption of side skirts, the distinctive Schürzen, on StuGs and numerous other German armored vehicles. These thin steel plates destabilized incoming projectiles before impact with primary armor, dramatically reducing penetration capability. Roof armor measured merely 10 millimeters thick, creating dangerous vulnerability to top attack threats from aircraft or anti-tank rifles fired from elevated urban positions. Both would inflict serious casualties as the war progressed, but this reflected inherent design compromises. The StuG sacrificed all-around protection to maximize frontal armor. It was engineered to absorb punishment from the front, because that's where crews expected to engage targets. Following Kursk, German High Command thoroughly reassessed the StuG's battlefield contribution. Consequently, production priorities shifted dramatically toward turretless tank destroyers. They cost less, required shorter manufacturing time, and proved more effective in the desperate defensive warfare Germany now faced across contracting front lines. Among German tank destroyers, the StuG remained exceptionally cost-effective. A single StuG cost approximately 70,000 Reichsmarks. By comparison, a Panzer IV ran roughly 100,000, while a Tiger demanded about 300,000. Simple arithmetic revealed that for every Tiger produced, Germany could field 4 StuGs. Yet this raises an obvious question. If StuGs were so effective, why did so few survive until war's end? The answer lies in how they were employed operationally. As Germany's strategic position deteriorated, StuG units found themselves thrown into one desperate defensive engagement after another. They inflicted severe casualties on advancing Allied armor, but outcomes followed a predictable pattern. Units held positions until destroyed, or until fuel and ammunition exhausted. When that moment arrived, crews had no choice but to abandon their vehicles after sabotaging them to prevent capture. Catastrophic loss rates also stemmed from deployment patterns. StuG battalions were perpetually rushed between crisis points, attempting to plug gaps in Germany's collapsing defensive lines. This meant experiencing the most intense combat repeatedly. Frequently, they served as sacrificial rearguards, covering main force withdrawals. They became emergency fire brigades for a front line that was everywhere burning simultaneously. Over time, they transitioned from elite units to expendable assets. Compounding these problems, StuGs increasingly found themselves committed to operations for which they were fundamentally unsuited. Many entered urban combat without accompanying infantry or armor support. Some deployed with virtually no tactical coordination. Almost none enjoyed air cover since Allied air forces dominated European skies. Under these conditions, StuGs became dangerously vulnerable to flanking maneuvers, handheld anti-tank weapons, and numerical superiority from massed Allied armor. Another grim reality emerged when vehicles took penetrating hits. Unlike turreted tanks where crew members occupied somewhat separated compartments, the StuG's 4-man crew all occupied a single fighting compartment. Consequently, when armor-piercing rounds penetrated, they typically killed or incapacitated the entire crew simultaneously. During the war's final phase, as Germany's manpower pool evaporated, replacement crews arrived woefully undertrained and thoroughly demoralized. These inexperienced recruits were committed to increasingly hopeless battles with minimal preparation and inadequate equipment. Of more than 10,000 StuGs manufactured during the war, approximately 1,300 remained operational by 1945. The mathematics of attrition tell their own brutal story. Despite everything, the StuG stands among World War II's most effective and practical fighting vehicles, representing a unique solution that actually delivered results. It never received the attention lavished on famous German tanks and tank destroyers, yet regarding tank kills, battlefield utility, and production numbers, nothing matched it. Without fanfare or glory, it remains Germany's deadliest armored vehicle.